Section 1 of Selected Works, Haymarket Speeches by Voltairine de Cleyre. This is a LibraVox recording. All LibraVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit libravox.org. The Fruit of a Sacrifice, from Selected Works, Haymarket Speeches by Voltairine de Cleyre. 8 times has our Mother Earth bared her scared breast to the bitter blast. 8 times laid naked this unhealing wound, whence blood still issues, this deep gash near her heart, wherein they thrust her murdered children's bodies, the grave at Waldheim. 8 weary years have the women wept, and the orphan children placed upon their father's tomb their wreaths of tear-wet flowers. 8 slumbrous years has the powerful silence lain upon those lips, that living never unclosed save to utter defiance to the tyrant that strangled but could not subdue. 8 solemn years has the sweet dead voice that filled the gloomy corridors of Cook County Jail with the tender song of undying love, on the last night that it ever sang, been echoing over the world. Far beyond the black wall of the prison, borne on invisible wings, up high into the garrets, and down low into the cellars of the world, floats the swan song of death, till from out of the night of a people's sorrow, in near and far off lands, the unknown voices waken and sing. Annihilatory. 8 rain-breathed springs have the graves grown green, 8 withering autumns turned old and white, and the immortal seed lain, germinating in the furrow. For you Greeners and Garys of the world, who for 8 blasting years have borne upon your brows the burning brand of Cain, for you the earthquake, for us liberty. Oh, there are so many things to gather from this grave, upon whose sodden grass the scarlet leaves whirl and scatter, whipped in the November wind, flying in the faces of the thousands gathered there, even as the words of the dead men whirl and scatter, scarlet flaming, lighting blazes in the hearts they touch. What shall we gather, comrades? What thought shall we bear away to serve us in another year of struggle, or that cause to us most dear? What is the most priceless lesson we can learn from the martyrdom of Parsons, Fisher, Engel, Ling, and Spies? For the saddest thing to me in all these commemorations is that the most of us only drop the tears of regret, only say, "Ah, they took away the best of our comrades, and there are none to fill their places." The idea of incommensurable, irreparable loss, the idea that whatever good come from the agitation created, was brought far too dear, since a continual pulsation of pain, a hopeless ache in the heart, such as one feels when the clang of a prison gate rings on the ear, and is told that a prisoner for life has gone in thereat. Is this pain justified? Is it true that sacrifice is foolish, and martyrdom an uncompensated loss? In the general breaking up of all our former conceptions based upon the theological idea of man and his relations, this is one that calls for an examination. All the history of the race, as we know, has been one long interlinking of sacrifice. Not a corner of the populated world so isolated, not a people so barbarous, not a religion so rude, not a reform so insignificant, but has had its authors, its Cranmeres, its Savonarolas, braving defiance under the mouths of guns, or singing glorias from the centre of smoke. But at the heart of these ecstatic triumphs over death has ever been the idea of a compensating God, who for pain suffered here will grant reward of bliss hereafter. Now modern science has proven that this God does not exist. Nowhere on sky or earth or sea can any trace of him be found. On the contrary, telescope, microscope, spectroscope, all enter the protest that cannot be gainsaid against a belief in the existence of any mythical power which troubles itself about an individual's life or death. All confirm the utterance of that wise man who said, "For what preeminence has man above the beast? As the one dieth, so dieth the other. Yea, they have all one breath." From the heights of the stars we hearken to the dust of the dead, and know that truly there is nothing new under the sun. Therefore the old belief which sustained the martyrs of the past, the old certainty of reward which upheld the sacrifices of the past, plays no part in our view of the tragedy of 11 November. Since God no longer enters in our estimate of the conduct of life, we must either regard sacrifice and martyrdom as acts of individual folly and social waste, or we must find a scientific basis to justify them. That is, we must find some reason which will not contradict any well-grounded statement of the processes of nature, or as we commonly say, natural law. Some reason which will warrant a human being involuntarily becoming a handful of senseless ashes for the sake of an idea. For the 19th century has produced these men, men who bowed at no shrine, acknowledged no God, believed in no hereafter, and yet went as proudly and triumphantly to the gallows as ever Christian martyr did of old. It is known that Albert Persons, of his own free will, returned and gave himself up to trial by the court, which sentenced him to death, when in fact nothing was easier for him than to have left America till the storm passed. It is not so generally known that even till the last, even on the fatal annihilatory night, had he but signed the petition to the governor, his sentence would have been commuted, and today he would have been free. He knew this, knew it to be a certainty, for had he been willing to sign the petition, such a pressure would have been brought to bear upon Oglesby as he could not have refused. When Parsons received Captain Black's telegram from Springfield, urging him to do it, he placed the telegram upon the table, and beside it the Marseillaise. It was to say, let this answer that, let the old strong song of defiance that the people have hurled against the rulers since '93 be my reply to those who bid me sue for my life at the feet of the state. No, I will not petition. Was it an act of folly or heroism? Which? Filden, Schwab, and Nib are free today. He might have been. Was it folly? Let us see the facts a little further. He knew that he could be saved, but his comrades, Ling, Fisher, Engel, and Spies, could not. They knew it too. Yet knowing it, they said, nevertheless, we will sign if Parsons will. We are willing to record ourselves as cowards, if by it we can influence him to save his life. And in that hope, Spies did sign the petition, though he knew it would be rejected. But Parsons said, I will not sign. What is my life? That for its sake my comrades should stand before the world as cowards, and their death be lost to the cause. What is my life? That for it they should satisfy the passion of the state's attorney, when he said, I want to make them do something for which the anarchists shall hate them. Take your petition. I will not sign. Ah, Mr. Grinnell, astute as you are, you failed. You did not make them waste the wine of the sacrifice. You could not make the anarchists hate them. No, but for every drop of blood you spilled on that November day, you made an anarchist. You sent their words on wings of flame in many tongues and many lands, where you hoped to sow the seed of hate. The immortals of love have bloomed, and tonight 10,000, nay, thrice 10,000, repeat in reverence the names of Parsons, Fisher, Engel, Ling, and Spies. Lost to the cause, gain 1,000-fold. Whenever men dream of liberty and dreaming dare, and daring strike, there above them, white, luminous, shining, as they stood upon the scaffold, appear the ghosts of Parsons, Fisher, Engel, Spies. Wherever in the horrible conflict between labourers and soldiers, a shattered, shredded striker is borne away by his comrades, who looking on his blood hate deeper, there walks the mangled corpse of Louis Ling, that brave beautiful boy, who, tossing his proud head, with his tawny hair like a lion's mane, and gazing with dauntless eyes full at the court about to sentence him, exclaimed, I do believe in force, hang me for it. Ah, you say, you are talking poetry. Let us see if we are not near the solution of the problem of martyrdom. The answer to the question, what shall it profit a man if he aid a cause, and yet lose his own life, since there is no work, no device, no knowledge, no wisdom in the grave whither he goeth? Let us then ask another question. What is a man? The theological idea was a soul and a body. But science says the body is so much lime, so much iron, so much sulfur, so much carbon, and so on, which disintegrate at death, and pass into other forms, but cannot be destroyed. But what is the soul? The scientist answers a compound, an organism of certain psychological elements, just as much facts as the physical ones which accompany them. The soul of man is so much courage, so much energy, so much prudence, so much daring, so much poesy, so much fear, hope, and so on through the qualities that make a man. As the body of every individual is a little different in the proportions of its composition from every other, so is the soul. This is all that makes an individual, but the soul elements, like the body elements, are common to all mankind, and at death nothing is lost in the one case any more than in the other, only transmuted. Death indeed, to the person who has thrown aside the old ideas of God and immortality, simply means a setting free of original elements to form new combinations, the lower forms being weeded out by the slow but certain action of natural selection, the higher constantly becoming more active and beneficent. To all the nobler elements of our comrades, brought so strongly forth in that unjust trial, sentence, incarceration, and execution, death met only an intenser, larger life. And when I say this, I do it not only from my own theoretical standpoint, but in the certain knowledge that such was their belief and acceptance in the case of Parsons and Fisher at least. I know it from the lips of one who never lied, one who lifted the standard when it was stricken down, one who saw them day after day in prison, one who would have gone to the scaffold with them, one who, strangled by the invisible rope of poverty, now lies 6 feet deep in the eternal dark, with the eternal smile upon his lips, dire dilem. And these were his words. In so exalted a state were they, so sure that death by the gallows was but a means of spreading further into the hearts of the people. They loved the ideas apart from which they had no life. That it was exactly the truth when Fisher said, "This is the happiest moment of my life," and those who saw his face say that it shone with a white light on the scaffold. This then is the justification of sacrifice, even to death, that through it the most active and enduring element in the martyr's personality is projected into the infinitely greater life of the race. Let us bear this thought with us. Let us believe that from under the granite shaft at Walham, from under the stone pedestal whereon the warrior mother, with her great sorrowful stern eyes, stands grasping the dagger while she drops the laurel on her slaughtered child, from under the earth and the night and the blight of death we hear again, let the voice of the people be heard, and lo, in the ear that listens, the murdered five repeating, "I am not dead, I am not dead, I live a life intense, divine. Yours be the days forever fled, but all the morrows shall be mine." End of the fruit of the sacrifice. Section 2 of Selected Works, Haymarket Speeches by Voltairine de Cleyre. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. November 11th, from Selected Works, Haymarket Speeches by Voltairine de Cleyre. Year after year, the rising sun of November 11th throws over the world the elongating shadow of the Chicago gallows. Year after year, the knowledge of the history of a governmental crime spreads and spreads. Year after year, the voices strangled to death cry louder through the silence. It is as if all these years were a thin screen, behind which walk the spectres of a revolution, wearing on this day the faces of those men, done to death for speaking, Parsons, Fisher, Engel, Ling, and Spies. It is as if these mute faces were bidding us remember their prophecies, and to note how truly they are marching to fulfillment. Every year the government's hands become redder with the blood of martyrs to free speech. Every year we hear yet more plainly the whizzing of the wings of the birds of the coming storm. Sometimes we fancy it is already the sound of the storm itself, and sitting in our corner we repeat the history of November 11th, and grind our hatred sharp. We tell ourselves again of the famous McCormick strike. We see the police riding down on the defenseless people, crying, "Shoot the goddamn son of bitches." We see men club, bruise, knock under the horses' feet in the sacred name of the McCormick Reaper works. We hear our comrades calling for a meeting of protest. We shift our eyes to the Haymarket on the 4th of May 1886. We see Parsons, Spies, Fieldon speaking from the wagon, and the crowd listening. Then the police marching in double column, coming down Deplan Street, turning about, firing. A man falls, struck by a police bullet. He clutches his side and writhes upon the ground. A thin line of blood oozes out. Others have fallen. Suddenly a vengeance goes over our heads, a thing like a lighted cigar, that falls and bursts with a low, sullen roar, and men fall everywhere. Then comes the terror, people rushing to accuse, others to escape accusation. Imaginations become realities, and men see bombs reflected from their eyes wherever they look. The police, affrighted, become ferocious. They seize and club at every turn. It is indeed the reign of the police, and gradually the anaconda of the law coils tighter and tighter. It accused our comrades, Parsons, who brought his wife and children to the meeting, presumably to be mangled by the bombs; Fischer, because he set up the Arbeiterzeitung; Spies, because he was the editor; Engel, because he too set rebellious type; Filden, because he spoke often at working men's meetings, bidding them prepare for the violence of capital; Schwab, mild and gentle Schwab, who also wrote articles; Nib, for he had a red flag in his house, and organized trade unions; Ling, oh, beautiful Corliss Ling, who was a bomb maker, but who did not even know till the next day that a meeting had taken place, and whose bombs bore no resemblance to the vengeance. They arrested them, all except Parsons, who voluntarily came into the court and gave himself up for trial, because he believed himself so sure of proving his innocence that he did not doubt the issue. Bitter mistake. The capitalists and their tools, Judge Gary and Prosecutor Grinnell, had determined to hunt anarchy to death. The procession of iniquities, called the trial, begins. The state's attorney boasts that he will have a jury packed to kill, boasts openly in the court that though these men are being tried legally for murder or conspiracy to murder, it is anarchy which is on trial. It is a political opinion which is to be hanged. Here in this astounding republic, which sprang into existence as the expression of a free political opinion. Not a man on the jury who does not admit that he is already prejudiced against the prisoners. Not a single peer among the 12. All are of the very parasite class which our comrades have shown in their articles and speeches could not continue but at the expense of the slavery of the producers. The verdict was pronounced before a word of witness was taken, and we all knew it. Then the delay, the agony, the tigerish coquetting with justice of the prosecution, the horrible purrings about our homes, our country, and our free institutions. Then the speeches, immortal voices, going to the ends of the earth, and loud over them the frank, harsh, defiant, ringing sentence of him who was least an orator, but bravest among those who were all brave. I do believe in force. Hang me for it. Then the petitions to the governor, the telegrams from the ends of the earth, the pleadings of their families, the swaying of the popular minds towards mercy, the petition tables in the streets, the crowds rushing to sign or to knock the tables over, as they swing towards this or that, the forbidding of all public speech on the subject by Mayor Rock, the forbidding of the singing of the Marseillaise, wonderful song that it should stir into prohibition our free institutions, the slow passing of days and the tightening, the relentless, desperate tightening of the coil of the anaconda, the commutation of the sentence of Filden and Schwab to life imprisonment, the refusal of Parsons to appeal for commutation, though he knew it would be granted if he did, preferring to die with his comrades rather than oblige Grinnell and do something to make the anarchists hate them. November 10th, Ling triumphs over the law through a dynamite cartridge given him in a cigar by a friend. He smokes the cigar and dies with cocktail anarchy on his lips. In his cell at night, Parsons sings Annie Laurie, listens to the builders putting up the gallows, and sleeps. November 11th, a thick cordon of police around the jail. Mrs. Parsons and Mrs. Holmes, with the little Lulu and Albert Parsons, going from one to the other for permission for the promised last interview, hustled on till at last arrested and thrown in prison. Even the little children's body is stripped naked in the terrorized search for dynamite, and so, with wife and children lying in cells, the condemned man goes to the gallows and never knows. Waldheim, and the last stack of the sewing is completed. Under the raw autumnal sky, men with bare heads are baptized with the solemnity of that faith which already seems springing from the yet unclosed tomb. And the years pass. The cemetery authorities forbid 11 November processions to the tomb. They cannot forbid the processions of thoughts and acts which go out from it. As the development of a struggle in which they died so early goes on, more and more clearly sound their prophecies. More and more clearly do we recognize that their work is our work, that one vengeance is the mother of many, that the crimes of states are accumulating, and from the Chicago gallows to the Barcelona torture room, There's one logical alliance of the powers that starve man, and that from the corners of the earth to its centers, there's growing the opposing solidarity of the starved. We watch for the morning of the end, and the light grows over Walheim. End of November 11th. Section 3 of Selected Works, Haymarket Speeches by Voltairine de Cleyre. This is a LibraVox recording. All LibraVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit libravox.org. November 11th, from Selected Works, Haymarket Speeches by Voltairine de Cleyre. Greater love hath no man, none than this, that he gave up his life for his friend. We are they to whom was given that utterance of love, we into whose ears there came a crying through the wilderness of poverty and shame and pain, a wind through the desert from the land of promise, voices that said, it is not right that you should hunger, it is not just that you should be denied one of the glories of this earth. The world is wide, it is not reason that you should bury yourselves in a narrow den and see the earth from behind a cave mouth, while a bird that you could grasp in your hand so is free to cross the continent and pick its food where it lists. It is not fairness that the things you have made should be taken from you by the hand that did not make it, and you be left with nothing but the smut and smell and memory of the torture of its making. It is insane that men should rot for want of things, and things for want of men. Insane that millions of creatures should huddle together till they choke, while millions of acres of land lie desolate. Insane that one should pour down his throat the labor of hundreds in a single night, and those hundreds always near the gateway of famine. It is criminal to believe that the mass of us are to be dumb animals, with nothing before us all our lives but eating, sleeping, and toiling at the best, with all the light and loveliness of nature and of art, an unknown realm of delight to us, to which we may look only as the outcast at Eden. It is stupid to allege, still more stupid to believe, that you who are able to do all the hard things of this world, to burrow and dig and hammer and build, to be cramped and choked and beaten and killed for others, are not able to win all for yourselves. You are not helpless if you do not will to be. You workers who labor and do not share, you need not be the ever-tricked dupes of politicians who promise what it is not in their power to perform, and perform what their buyers order them to. You have only to learn your own power to help yourselves, only to learn the solidarity of the interests of all those who work, only to learn to trust yourselves to take your rights, by no indirection, through no intermediary, but openly on the spot where they are denied from the one who denies them. And having taken keep, the wealth and the love and the beauty of this earth are yours. When you are ready to take them, you are no beggars at your brother's table, children of one plenteous board. There is enough for all, and none need want. Do they tell you to look to the kingdom of God? We tell you to look to the kingdom of this world. For verily, men have looked long enough to post-mortem justice, and thereby only supported another injustice, the trade in salvation, and buying and selling of heaven. They tell you there have always been rich and poor, and that what has always been always must be. It is not true that there have always been rich and poor, neither is it true that what has always been must always be. Men and the societies of men are creatures of their conditions, responsive to the pressure upon them from without, like all other things, and not only liable to change, but bound to change. Every age finds its own adjustment. There have been times and places wherein all men were poor, as we should think them now, yet no injustice done, for all shared alike. There have been whole races of men, with infinite history behind them, who never knew mine and fine. They have passed away, people and system together, with the method of making a living, and property, with all its varying forms of attendant slavery, has come into existence in response to the irresistible demand for a change to suit new methods of production. And as it had to come, so it will have to go. It is impossible it should continue, for under this plethora of products turned out by the newer methods, property has lost its power to balance man and the thing, shoved out by the tireless, flying steel hands. Piled in great masses, products accumulate. The toiler at the base is flattened under the weight which property makes it impossible to distribute. The mountain of riches crushes its creator. Men and things are at waste. It cannot go on. The dead weight cannot forever press down the living energy. In the end, distribution must come. Out from its burrow comes writhing a distorted, mangled, bruised and bleeding figure. misshapen, ugly, black, covered with hell light, suffocated, gasping. It struggles onto its feet at last, wipes the blood and sweat out of its eyes, gives a wild stare at this mountain of gold and glass and glitter it has made, catches a brief vision of the dwellers on the mountain, and with a mad cry leaps upon the thing to destroy it. He is a giant still. Has he not, down there in the underground, been through the blows that temper and fires that try? Maimed and lamed, there's brawn in him yet. Seared and numbed, he can yet feel for a white throat. The hand that hammered the balls has a wild grasp in it still, that lays hold and wrenches apart, more desperately than it put together. The mountain is levelled, and he begins again. He is the revolution, and he is a fool, for he will need to make and destroy, until he destroys the institution which makes accumulation possible. He, why he? You working people, you are that fool. You are he who scoops the sea and dies in the desert for a cup of water. You are he who piles that mountain of wealth, and finds nothing better to do with it when it crushes him thereafter than to set fire to it. But listen, fool, there is something better for you. This thing. Property is not the final word of the human intellect with regard to the distribution of wealth. Beyond the smoke edge of this frightful battle of man and machine, what lies? The ideal of communism, perpetual freedom of access to natural sources of wealth, never to be denied by man to his brother man. Perpetual claim on the commonwealth of the ages, never to be denied to the living by the dead. Perpetual claim upon the satisfactions of all common needs of the human body, never to be denied to the living by the living. Beyond the smoke wreath of the battle, what lies? Days of labor that are sweet, men and women doing the work that nature calls them to, that in which they delight, laboring at a chosen service, not one into which they have been forced, working and resting at reasonable hours, sleeping when the earth sleeps, not driven out into the darkness like an unloved child, to turn night into day and cripple the overdriven body by unnatural hours of pleasure stolen from sleep. Chosen toil, room, recreation, sleep, this poor outcast animal, men are to be yours. Beyond the smoke rim of the battle, what lies? The death of cities, the people resurgent upon the land, the desert blossoming into homes, the air and light of nature once more sending the strength through nerve and vein, and with it the less power to feel the joy of existence, the realization that one is something more than flesh to feed and sleep, a creature of colors and sounds and lights, with as keen an ear for a bird's song, as ready an eye for a tint of cloud as any woodsman in the older days, a creature with as fine a taste for pictures and books and statuary and music, ay, and with a hand to execute them too, as any man who lives today upon your sweat, buys his library with your dribbled blood, and condenses the flesh that has vanished from your bones into the marble which adorns his alcoves. Beyond the smoke haze of the battle, what lies? Life, life? Not existence, life. What has been denied to you, life that has ever been reserved to your masters, the broad world and all its pleasant places, and all its pleasant things. This was the cry that came to us, and we listened and heard. We followed the crying voices through this wilderness of brick and stone, for it was a fair hope, and who would not wish to dream it true? None but the masters, and they were afraid. They clamored for suppression of the voices. Let not this work cattle of ours get this vision of man, they said, else they will cease to be beasts, and we. And that demand for suppression produced the Haymarket bomb. Let it be said here and now, in the city of the event, in the teeth of those that compassed the death of 5 men, whose sin was to have prophesied a noble life, to be born even through blood and pain, after the manner of old birth, that the time has gone past when one should stand and say, as has been said in the past, that the Haymarket bomb was a police plot. The police never plotted anything half so just. The Haymarket bomb was the defense of a man who stood upon the constitutional declaration that the right of free speech and the right of the people peaceably to assemble shall not be abridged, worker or non-worker, anarchist or anarchist, that man acted as an American constitutionalist, and if ever in this world an act of violence was just, that bomb was just. Every policeman wounded by that bomb was the victim of the treasonable order of Inspector Bunfield. At his door, and the door of the masters he served, lies the blood of Matthias Degon and his fellows. But did they care, they who had been waiting their opportunity? Whose was the act Did they care for the dead policemen, whose names they used to hang their black lying charge upon? Not they. They cared no more for the hounds of the law, thus sacrificing to a violation of law, than they cared for the undiscovered hand that threw the bomb. They cared only for the crying voices that threatened them with a new time. They set themselves to do those men to death, and they did it. What need to repeat here the history of that black crime, called the trial of the Chicago anarchists? Is it not fresh in all our minds how the jury of peers was chosen from the ruling class? Not one single peer of the accused among them all. Has not the highest official authority in the state of Illinois told with legal dispassion how every one of these jurymen admitted before he began that he was prejudiced, and how each was so tempered with and twisted by the ruling judge that the lie, "I think I can be fair," was wrung out of their mouths? Do we not remember how Grinnell boasted to Mr. Favor that he had packed the jury to hang? Are not that dead wretch's words yet in our ears, saying, "Anarchy is on trial"? Was it not openly avowed to all the world that here in this country, founded as the asylum of opinions, men were being sentenced to death for their opinions? Have we not today admission coming in from every quarter, such as this from the November number of the Century magazine? As to miscarriages of justice, have there been no cases where groups of men among our most disinterested citizens, moved by means information, or touched by pride, or influenced by false notions of honor, have stood up on the side of falsehood and worked sad injustice to men of conscience, who spoke the truth and feared not? At least one such cause célèbre has not quite passed out of the memory of the living. Sad injustice to men of conscience. This bit of justice comes a little late for the men who are dead, yet it is an admission. Of all the political trials that ever outraged the forms even of legal justice, to say nothing of the spirit, it has remained to republics to give the worst. If the Tsar of Russia wishes an example of despotism, let him look to America. Here it is that we shoot men for marching on the highway, and hang them for preaching ideas. Yes, it is all fresh in our memories, fresh as that bitter November day, 12 years ago, when Parsons, Fisher, Engel, Spies waited within for the signal of doom, while without a helpless mother and wife pled for the keeping of a broken promise to the heartless cordon of the law around the sullen hole of death, pled for the last clasp of the hand that in an hour could clasp no more, the last look from the eyes that would die and never know whose promise it was that had been broken, fresh as the memory of a singing voice that went up in the night and gloom, calling sweetly, "She's a' the world to me," fresh as the memory of a lifted hand, and the voice repeating, "This hand is as steady as when in the old days it plucked the already ripe fruit from life's tree," fresh as the memory of the deathless words, "The time will come when our silence will be more powerful than the voices you strangle today. Long live anarchy! This is the happiest moment of my life. Will I be allowed to speak, O men of America? Let me speak. Sheriff Matson, let the voice of the people be heard. Oh!" Fresh as the memory of the gallows, entrapped in the swinging, dying bodies, fresh as the memory of him, the beautiful one, the brave, defiant one, who took his death not waiting for your hangman, and from his poor mangled dying throat whispered hoarsely at the end, "Long live anarchy!" Fresh and forever fresh, O rulers of the world, the memory of the deed you did that day, grain in our hearts as the holy at Yule. Doubt not you shall be remembered. Doubt not you shall be paid. With what measure ye mete unto others, it shall be meted back unto you again. No item of the record shall escape. Shall we not recall the tricks that were done to turn the tide of sympathy which welled up when terror and cowardice were abating, and decent human nature began to assert itself? Have we not before our eyes the picture of petition tables overturned in the streets, in our ears the edict of Mayor Rourke? No public discussion of the anarchist case, no singing of the Marseillaise. Do we not remember the 4 bombs found in Link's cell, conjured through the stone walls and deposited there by anarchist magic? It is all remembered. We know you are our creditors still. Perhaps you would have interest. It is one of your institutions. And what did you accomplish? You struck a welding blow that beat the hearts of the working people of the world together. You lifted out of the obscurity of the common man 5 names, and set them as beacons upon a hill. You sent the word anarchy ringing through every workshop. You gave us a manifold crucifixion, and dignified what had been a speculative theory with the sacrificial cause of a religion. In the heart of this black slag heap of grime and crime, you have made a sacred place, for in it you lopped off an arm from the cross, and gave us the gallows. And if it were given us to see tonight the thoughts of men made visible, we should behold the grave at Walham in the heart of a star, whose rays shot inward from the uttermost earth. Aye, they are streaming over many waters, and out of strange lands where the English tongue is never spoken. They, the invisible phantoms that pass in the darkness, less of substance than the wind that floats the November leaf, but mightier than all the powers that ever mowed the human grass when governments went reaping. They are pouring in tonight, the intangible dreams that bind masses of men together in the bond of the ideal, a bond that ties tighter than all bonds of flesh, for it makes that one shall look into a stranger's eye and know him for his own, shall hear a word from the antipodes and hold it for a brother's voice, shall ask no name, no station, no race, no country, no religion, but put himself beside his fellow worker, needing no question, since he knows that other labors and would be free. A surge of comradeship sweeping over the earth this night, the chant of rebellious voices singing the storm song of the peoples, an earth circle of reverberations from those lips that are dead. Long live anarchy! Rung out this hour from platforms in every great city in the United States, England, France, Australia. Talk low in Italy and Spain and Germany, whispered in the cellars of Russia, the cells of Siberia, and murmured on the lonely islands where our prison comrades rot away. The words, 12 years ago today, they hang our comrades in Chicago, and the debt is yet unpaid. Aye, it is growing, growing. Your fear word, our fire word, anarchy. Lean your ear to the wind, and you will hear it, the never dying, never finished speech, denied, choked by you that shameless day. A warmer singing glows on the world's communal flag, stamped out, stamped in by you, the blood of a rose of death. End of November 11th. Section 4 of Selected Works, Haymarket Speeches by Voltairine de Cleyre. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit librivox.org. Our Martyred Comrades from Selected Works, Haymarket Speeches by Voltairine de Cleyre. My heart is away at a grave tonight, a grave I see as I saw it once. I think I shall always see it so, lying green and sweet in the October light, that flowing its clean, unbartered gold so generously on leaf and blade and stone, and all around in the soft wind the tremulous fleetings and murmurings that made one feel not in a place of death, but in a place of peace. I see again that speaking stone, that silence that is more powerful than voice, the pedestal with its graving, the warrior woman, and the martyr dead. I feel the last strenuous agony in the drawn limbs, the shakeless resolution in the warrior mother's sad, stern eyes. Beyond to the right I see my companion's figure, half turned from me, his hand shading his eyes, and then across the sunlight, between me and the stone, I see a woman with a little child by the hand. I see them stop and hear the pitying pathos in the woman's voices, as she says to my comrades softly in German, "All under one stone, all under one stone," he answers, and there is a low, inarticulate exclamation of pity, while the child stands with a shadow of awe on its face. And then I hear the voices from beneath the sod, the voices that death sent crying on all the winds of the world, till all men shall hear and know what they died for. Today it is said that they died because they preached a gospel of destruction and of hate. Oh, they died because they loved too much, because they could not see the pain, the madness, the blind struggle of ignorance, and be silent, considering themselves. What did it matter to them that this poor sad animal man is apt to turn in his rage and tear the one who would help him? Did they not know it? Did they not know that the spirit of authority, stamped into the human soul by unknown thousands of years, would seek its vengeance? But what did it matter? They had their message to deliver, their hope to give, the fullness of their being to express. What matter? if it let them down into the storm and night. And what was the message? Why, that real justice and real liberty might come on earth. That it was all false, all unnecessary, this wild waste of human life, of bone and sinew and brain and heart, this turning of people into human rags, ghosts, piteous caricatures of the creatures they had it in them to be, on the day that they were born, that what is called economy, the massing up of things, is in reality the most frightful spending, the sacrifice of the maker to the made, the loss of all the finer and nobler instincts in the gain of one revolting attribute, the power to count and calculate, out of a deep sense of giant wrong done to themselves and their fellows, out of their abiding faith that it needs only to see where the wrong lies, only to realize what possible change might come, and the workers must rise in mass and restore themselves with a strong hand to their right. They cried out. Theirs was a burning message, red at the heart, and leaping in flame from lips that did not stop to pick and choose their words. They preached in the common highway, and gathered to themselves all who willed to listen. They preached in the common language, for they were working men, who did not study how to turn periods, but wished to be understood. They said what they meant, and all they meant, and that perhaps was unwisdom. But if so, it is the common mistake of all the great fervid souls that have ever scourged their way through the callous ruins of men, and touched the torpid heart within till it beat drum music. They believed that Lincoln and Grant were right when they predicted further uprisings of the people, wild convulsions in the effort to re-establish some equilibrium in possessions. They were revolutionists who believed that the revolution could not be brought out peacefully because of the historic tendency in the possessors to use force whenever their privileges are threatened. They said so. They advised their fellows to prepare for these things. In this they may have been mistaken. It may be that the diffusion of ideas and of the spirit of freedom may take such hold upon the general mind as will give us what we never yet have seen, a great social change, without violence or destruction. Let us hope so. But hope cannot blind us to the fact that so far their prophecies have been fulfilled, and that not for any great change, but for a meagre bettering of conditions within the existing system. Men are shut upon the roads, and their corpses cry up from the sod for justice, receiving none. What like then is it to be, when they ask for all that which nothing but their own ignorance keeps them from demanding, when they ask for the restoration and the perpetual indivisibility of the earth, and the great stores within her bosom, when they ask for the free use of that which the genius of man, not of man, has made, when they reclaim their right to the best in the world, not to the meanest and poorest, when they ask for room, and plenty of room, each and every one, no meagre little yard fenced in with walls, but acres, acres without fences, where they may watch things grow and blossom, and feel again the joy of life and the sweet kinship with all living things, learn the forgotten law of the savage who knew all the colors of the leaves and the shapes of them, and the way they turned to the sun, and the peculiar instrument that played in the throat of every bird, and the promises of weather that budded in the sky, and saw every night a full, clear, unbroken view of the great arc with all its stars, not a blue patch cut into angles with roofs fouled with smoke, seen out of the cellar of existence, when the man with the hoe shall look up from the sod, and beholding the glory that is around him, shall see in the cloud what he has not seen before, beauties and possibilities endless, where before was only heavy dull thing that resisted his hoe, but must be turned for its master's sake. Nay, when he shall feel in himself, till now the cold, dull, heavy human clod, something stirring towards birth, towards growth, towards light and liberty, when the nature that has been repressed in him, chilled, frosted, bound in abeyance, shall struggle into gleams in those sad eyes, and soften the brute jaw, and push out the backward slanting brow, when he shall feel tumultuous throbbings, beating ineffectually, but powerfully within him, the desire to see something indistinct which shines palely luminous in his old darkness, the vision of a larger, fuller life, the yearning for selfhood, self-expression, being that of which he dreams. Oh, no longer to echo the thoughts of others, to bring forth a note of one's own, no longer to move at the word of others, to move or be still at one's own desire. What will it be, when the digger in the depths, down in the blackness and the foulness, pictures to himself the life of light, and takes it boldly, when the toiler, amid the machineries, in the clang and clash and roar, demands for his ears the sounds which mellow, the silence which stills? If for this paltry thing, an hour less of labour, a small wage increase, men are shut upon the road, what will the answer be when they demand all this? We do not know, but all this, not one jot or tittle less than this, anarchism means. It means awakening of soul and body, brain and heart, and goodbye forever to the slave's content with small concessions. Perhaps when the rich and the rulers realize this, when they understand that the non-possessors have wakened to their own powers and possibilities, they will respect those whom they despise so now, whose lives they hold so cheap, for respect is generally given to him who respects himself, and contempt to him who crawls. Perhaps when they know that ours is a universal gospel, having its word for them as well as for the poor, offering them the same as the others, full life, liberty, better ideals and purposes, they too may accept it and voluntarily join with us in working out the problem of society in freedom. But with them or without them, hand in hand, or hand against hand, through life or through death, humanity in mass moves towards the land of freedom. And to borrow the imagery of Oliver Schreiner, many are they who go down to the dark river that lies between, and are swept away and are drowned. Their bodies do not even build the bridge, and when at last the future men and women shall pass over the bridge built with bodies, it will be the unremembered dead, falling today on every hand, in field and factory and mine, whose corpses shall be the pyres where on it rest. I speak of the daily sufferers, the helpless victims of capitalism and the state, who die and know not why they die. But these our comrades, who were self-conscious, reasoning, who went with clear eyes to the gallows, and died triumphantly as ever any martyr did of all, they of whom even their bitterest enemies had to say, "They died like brave men," they will be known and remembered long, even in the land of freedom. We shall feel their living heartbeats as we step upon this swaying bridge. We shall hear their deaf words crying till the fields of life are won, and up along the banks of the farther shore there comes a drifting of unborn voices singing, "Blessed are the dead who died for freedom." Shall I say over again what you have said every year, these 13 years, that the specific act with which they were charged, conspiracy with the thrower of the Haymarket bomb, was never remotely proven? Shall I repeat that the trial was unfair, the jury prejudiced, the judge committed conviction, the prosecutor openly bragging they had packed the jury to hang? Governor Algell has saved me the trouble of all this. Whoever will dispassionately read his reasons for pardoning Filden, Neeb and Schwab will know it beyond a doubt. They are taken from the court testimony itself. You can ask nothing more. They were tried and hanged for preaching anarchism. The bomb thrower was never known, probably never will be. Whoever it was, he threw it as an act of resistance to the unconstitutional proceeding of the police in breaking up a peaceable meeting. The aggression began with the guardians of law and order, who fired into the crowd and drew forth a bomb as an answer to their bullets. Right or wrong, it had nothing to do with the right to advocate opinions, but it served as the lever to move the machinery of the law against our comrades. It is all false that the hanging was done because they were preaching violence. It is not violence the ruling classes object to, for they themselves rule by violence, and take with a strong hand at every door. It is the social change they fear, the equalization of men. Tyranny has often mistaken its means, and the rulers of Illinois repeated history. What they would have destroyed, they multiplied. Where they would have cursed, they blessed. And many a one will say with me tonight, in answer to the question, "What made you an anarchist?" The hanging in Chicago. Well, they are gone, and we who are here tonight may not have long to stay, for we are moving down past the middle line, and those who live a strenuous life rarely live to be old, but few or many our years we shall spend them working for that which to us is the only thing worth working for, the free life. To the fervent hopes and efforts of the younger generations we commit the memories of 13 years ago. praying them never to forget the price paid by the dead, nor the anguish of some yet living, never to forget that the way to honor a sacrifice is to follow up the spirit of it, and that if to you too has come the vision of men made one, without countries, nations, divisions, classes, without authorities priestly or civil, with the peace that is real, the equality which means free self-expression. Be bold to bear witness to it, picture it, work for it, live for it if you can, die for it if you must. Remember the dungeon and the gallows tonight, and the flesh, warm like yours, that is thus or corroding in prison cells, and be not silent under pain of condemnation of your own soul, that last judge to whom all courts are as nothing, to whom you can tell no lies, and who will be with you to the edge of doom, true to your ideal. You may at the end speak to scoffer and persecutor the beautiful lines quoted by our beloved parsons near the last: I am not dead, I am not dead, I live a life intense, divine. Yours be the days forever fled, but all the morrows shall be mine. End of our martyred comrades. Section 5 of Selected Works, Haymarket Speeches by Voltairine de Cleyre. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit librivox.org. Memorial Address from Selected Works, Haymarket Speeches by Voltairine de Cleyre. Blessed are they who die at the flood tide of hope, in the strength of the youth of the spirit, they whose memory among men was fixed at the hour when life pulsed high and full, and the task they had set themselves to do seemed worth the doing, to be stricken at the moment when being is richest, and so to remain forever an image of unconquerable youth and faith through all men's future. Yes, that was worth the bitter waters of martyrdom. And so he knew and felt who, facing his agony, called through the door of doom, "This is the happiest moment of my life." To have known but two things, work and poverty, not to have known two things, rest or ease, and still through all one's darkness to have searched and found at last the light of liberty, the light of a living faith in living possibilities, to have preached that faith and been done to death for it, and still to have gone to the gallows firm and unshaken, and with one's last voice still to proclaim that hope for other men, that was to reconquer youth, and seize at the moment of greatest faith and greatest fortitude. And so died he, whose last words were, "Long live anarchy." To have felt oneself a prophet of a great storm, to know that the price of one's cry is a scaffold, but that after the awful moment of strangulation is past, one's bones shall preach from under one's burial stone more powerfully than one's living tongue, that so one's work remains active and persistent till the history of oppression shall have faded from the human mind, as he did surely know who said, "The time will come when our silence will be more powerful than the voices you strangle today." Yes, those hours of exaltation were worth years of ordinary life. To have stood at the summit of moral greatness, and renounced the possibility of life and freedom in the end, choosing to take no iota less than one's whole right, and rather than that to give all, to have loved the common people unto the last, and died with a dear, loving, tender appeal to them upon one's lips, leaving those words as the pulse of one's heart forever. That was to die a supreme death, and so died he whose last breath said, "Let the voice of the people be heard." Sculptured by death, they stand upon their gallows pedestal, and behind them the mutilated face of that heroic boy, still whispering with his torn and shapeless lips, "Hoc die anarchy." And whenever a blaze from the storm they foretold streaks across the world, it reveals the Chicago gibbet, its prophets standing thereon, just as they stood 19 years ago, unshaken and unaltered. Had the vindictive terror of the bourgeoisie been satisfied with a smaller sacrifice, who knows? Our comrades might have grown weary and worldly wise like other men, and in a little while their words and their deeds been forgotten. But nothing but death sufficed, and they who smote out the fire of life at the full heat smote only to scatter. Live sparks flew in the wind, and kindled everywhere, and though there is nothing but ashes in the five-fold grave, there are flaming memories, from world's end to world's end tonight. In the light of those memories we meet lest we forget, and lest you forget who did this thing. You would be glad to forget and believe that anarchy was strangled 19 years ago, and the rats driven to their holes. But long ago you learned that anarchy was not strangled, nor the movement of the working people, and sometimes you fancy you hear the rats gnawing, and in your terror you want to strangle again, for not yet have you learned the lesson that men die but principles live. This night they sit in an Idaho jail, 3 men accused for the same reasons and by the same methods as those used in Chicago. And if in the end Moyer, Haywood and Pettibone go free, it will not be because you have any intent to do justice, but because your artificers will have failed. For organizing war upon your system of slavery, these men are obnoxious to you, and you seize upon an anonymous act of violence to accuse them of conspiracy. It is ever the coward's word, and small wonder you impute it to others, in view of the miserable lies and tortures you resort to extort confessions of conspiracy from weaklings whom your cruelty drives mad. Well, this time you have overshot the mark, but you will not learn by it. So long as teachers rise up to teach the reconstruction of society without you, so long you will do them to death, imprison, persecute somehow, until the working people in mass declare an end of your privileges. Until then, you will continue to pass all manner of stupid and hysterical laws, such as the Illinois conspiracy law and the New York criminal anarchy law, under which at present 11 persons, most of them under 20 years of age, are now indicted for the crime of having attended an anarchist meeting, and who, such is the elasticity of this law, which leaves the definition of the offense to the judge's discrimination, are liable to be sentenced to 10 years imprisonment, not for having said anything, but for having heard someone say something. But though you do all this, in the end the reckoning will be paid. You will burn it in, and brand it deep into the sluggard brains of the people at last, that their brothers ought to be hunted down and killed for trying to liberate them. You will have taught them the lesson of cruelty, and they will show you that they have learned it. For with what judgment you judge, you shall be judged, and with what measure you mete, it shall be meted back unto you again, and heaping full. It is very still at Waltham, so still you may hear the falling leaf, and nothing moves under the ground, but in the silence you can feel the gathering of the judgment. End of memorial address. Section 6 of Selected Works, Haymarket Speeches by Voltairine de Cleyre. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. November 11th, 20 years ago. From Selected Works, Haymarket Speeches by Voltairine de Cleyre. A peaceable meeting of protest against a murderous attack of the police on strikers, a meeting already half dispersed because of an approaching storm, an unprovoked attack by 200 police upon the remnant of a meeting, a sullen glow in the air, a dull and angry roar, wounded and dying police and citizens, terror and consternation, bewildered faces and flying feet, a panic-stricken city full of the savagery of fright, so passed the 4th of May 1886 into history. A wild and insane spirit of revenge, a determination to hang somebody, as many as possible, a crystallization of that determination in a conspiracy fury which would drag in those whom the police and the partisans of all order most dreaded, a vicious resolution to use every method, every trick, no matter how shameful, to bring 8 men to the gallows, to deceive and inflame the public mind, to twist the law, to admit prejudiced jurors, to suborn perjury, to rule out every fair-minded person from a chance of influencing the trial in favor of the accused, to convict at all costs and to hang. That was the task the social powers set themselves, and they fulfilled it. And with the hanging of their victims, the curtain went down upon the tragedy, and the 11th of November passed into history. There was a comedy played afterwards, a comedy in which the victimizers became the victims, and paid over thousands of good round dollars to their servants, the police, for protecting them from conspiracies which were hatched in the police stations. The comedy lasted about 3 years, and was very funny to the policemen who divided the spoils. It, however, has not passed into history. It was thought better to preserve the memory of it by oral tradition. The tragedy, however, is written. It is in the school histories of the country, and every child who studies the administrations of the presidents learns about it. And this is what he learns: that in the year 1886 there were many strikes and labor troubles, that there was a small but dangerous class of people in Chicago, called anarchists, that at one of their meetings a bomb was thrown, killing a number of policemen, and several other anarchist leaders were convicted of conspiring to throw it and hanged. All up and down the land, millions of school children learn that paragraph, with such additional embellishments as their teachers see fit to provide, and the half-truth and altogether lie of it goes on killing the souls of the murdered men, as once the scaffold killed their bodies. Only long ago the preachers told us, souls cannot be killed, and in spite of all the malice and the injustice and the ignorance and stupidity that have heaped and are heaping outrage on their memory, the conquering voices of the dead men rise, and the conquering spirit that animated them in those days of bitter doom, the spirit of love and faith in human possibility, triumphing over all oppression and suppression, slowly makes its way. 20 years have died upon their graves since they died on the gallows, and venom and spite and fear, most venomous of all, have had their say. Yet other voices sometimes have spoken. Great lawyers have said it was a shame, and General Trumbull tried the judgment after Gary had thought it necessary to defend it, and John P. Altgeld said and did a thing or two. And now, after 20 years, a man of different stamp has spoken, and a great conservative magazine has published his say. Appleton's magazine for October contains an article entitled "The Haymarket and Afterwards" by Chas. Edward Russell, a newspaper reporter for the N.Y. World in 1887, and though there is much misinformation therein, when did a newspaper scribe ever neglect to furnish misinformation? The general intent is plainly to do justice to the memory of the murdered man. I do not know whether this Mr. Russell tried to do anything to save them while they were yet alive. I have never heard that in all these 20 years he tried to tell the world the truth he has told here, but it is something that at last he has spoken and said, that the conspiracy charge was conceived in a spirit of revengeful fury, that the working out of it was entrusted to a man afflicted with delusions, who arrested every person that spoke defective English as a direful conspirator, and extracted confessions to suit his purposes, but the methods of the trial were unusual. Surely Mr. Russell did not choose a harsh word there, that so far as the record goes, the bomb might have fallen by accident, or been hurled by a lunatic, or by somebody that never heard of the accused man. Very grateful I am to Mr. Russell for his tribute to the beauty and magnanimity of Albert Parsons' character. Very glad I am that he has told the readers of Appleton's how till the end, till the very last, Parsons would have saved his life, and he complied with the formality of the law and signed the petition to Gov. Oglesby, but that he would not do so, because he would not desert those others whose lives could not be saved. What he does not add is this, that Fisher and Engel were willing to sign the petition if he agreed to it, not that they hoped for themselves, but hoped for him. But he, knowing they could not be saved, said, "Then every night in Juliet, upon retiring, and every morning on arising, I should be haunted by the thought that I had made cowards of them in vain. No, I shall die with them." Not grateful to Mr. Russell I am for his contemptuous rating of Adolf Fisher, and his miserly recognition of the abilities of Spies and Schwab and Filden. Yet one cannot quarrel with another's impressions, so long as there is no malice in their statement, and I let that pass. But when it comes to Ling, then all at once the fair man disappears, and the sensational news artist, the descriptive magician, we all learned to know so well 20 years ago, comes to the surface. Under his prestidigitation, the human being disappears, and a monster stands before you, clothed with abnormal strength of body and capacity of mind. A slim boy of 21 becomes a secret, wily, resourceful and daring conspirator, a wild beast, a modern berserker, the least human man he ever knew, a formidable creature, pacing up and down the jail corridor with a lithe, gliding and peculiar step, etc., etc. The more I read, the more forcibly became the contrast between this Ling of Mr. Russell's conceiving and the link painted by a good, kindly German lady, who used to take the prisoners something to eat sometimes. One day he said to her, "I was dancing in my cell last night. They had a ball over there somewhere, and I heard the music, and oh, I did so want to be there and dance." Inhuman desire on the part of a youth of 21. Had Mr. Russell seen him dancing in his cell, he would probably have read abnormal physical or mental something or other into this pathetic attempt of a caged young creature to pass the lonely hours of a prison cell. But the reason for Mr. Russell's peculiar visions concerning Ling is that he feels nearly certain that Ling made the Haymarket bomb. Ling conceived the slaughter of the police. Ling founded the lair and were therein. Ling was the only anarchist of the seven. Ling was everything, in short, except the bomb thrower. The latter was, he says, Rudolf Schnoebelt. He does not give his reasons for these opinions. He simply makes assertions. Now as to the lair and were therein, it was not founded by Ling. He was a member, but not the founder, nor suggestor of it. In the second place, the lair and were therein had nothing to do with the Haymarket bomb. It would be rather ridiculous to suppose that a society composed of some hundreds of people, organized to maintain its civil rights because of the ballot box frauds which had wrested their political victory from them, should be led by the nose by one man, and he a mere boy. In the third place, I do not believe Ling made the Haymarket bomb, for the reason that he pointed out the difference between it and the bombs he did make. And while I do not think he was superhuman, either mentally, physically, or morally, I think he was an exceedingly courageous man, and an honest one, and I do not believe he would have resorted to any petty subterfuges before the court. I think if he had done that thing, he would have said so, as boldly as he did say other things. There was no want of candor in his speech. Mr. Russell's confident identification of the bomb thrower is probably based on the letter written by Schnoebelt, taking the responsibility for the act, which may or may have not been true. A lot of fairy stories always arise around a mystery of this kind, and between one man's imagination and another's, the mystery gets so elusive that even shrewder guessers than Mr. Russell find themselves at sea and adrift. I believe that the matter will remain a mystery, as it has remained for 20 years. Captain Black has said, in a statement printed in the Life of Parsons, that in his last endeavours to secure a reprieve for the condemned men, the effort was made on the ground that he had reliable assurance that the bomb thrower would deliver himself up and prove that he was a stranger to the accused, and that they had no complicity with him. The reprieve was not granted, and our comrades being slain, I can see no motive for the bomb throwers ever revealing his identity. A masked and silent figure, he has passed across the world, and left his mark upon it. What does it matter now who he was? It was not one of the 8 men whom the state punished for it. There are other legendary matters in the article, things positively untrue, but they do not greatly matter. The public may believe that Ling's sweetheart gave him a bomb to kill himself with, if it likes. I do not. The public may believe there were precisely 14 anarchists, believers in the use of physical force, grouped together in Chicago. I take the statement with salt. The public may believe the statement that the police behaved with conspicuous courage in the face of a bomb, and did not falter, that they closed up their ranks, drew their revolvers, and began to fire upon the dumbfounded people who fled in all directions. I shouldn't myself have thought it required conspicuous courage to fire upon dumbfounded and fleeing people. Moreover, I have been told of a gentleman who, being wounded in the leg by some splinter of a bomb, sought refuge in a closet, to whose friendly shelter 6 policemen had fled before him. They begged him not to give them away. The position may have been undignified and not altogether heroic, but I do not blame those 6 policemen. But all these things matter little now. What matters now is that the world shall know how and for what our comrades died. Mr. Russell says, the world of men outside our country seems to have accepted the belief that the defendants were tried on the charge that they were anarchists. It may be well, therefore, to recall that they were tried merely on the charge that they were accessories before the fact of the murders of Matthias G. Deegan and others. The world outside our country thinks very correctly that our comrades were tried for being anarchists and hanged for being anarchists. Over and over again, the State's attorney repeated that anarchy was on trial. His final appeal was, hang these 8 men and save our institutions. These are the leaders, make examples of them. Well, they made the example. They murdered these men, not because of evidence that they had conspired to murder Deegan, but because they preached the gospel of liberty and well-being to all, and an end of the institutions which enslave the many to the few. The men are dead, 20 years are dead, but the strange doctrine that they preach is not dead, nor stamped out, nor forgotten. The doctrine that there need be no poor and forsaken in the world, no shelterless, no freezing ones, no craven and cowering ones, biting the dust for a crust and a rag, no tyranny of masters nor of rulers, that all these are not, as we have been taught, necessary, but only ignorant and foolish, that life may mean wide opportunity and rich activity for every human being born, that mankind has only to conceive its own possibilities, cease preying upon itself, and combine its powers for the conquest of the earth, for toil to become easy and fruitful a thousandfold, so all may have the good things of the earth, and more than that, may have free time to learn what really are good things, to modify its barbarian tastes, to escape from the vulgar ideas imposed upon it by its dead past and its slavish present, its stupid pursuit of valueless things, begotten by this profit-making system of production, free time to partake of its heritage in the triumphs of science, which only too often remain barren in the studies of great thinkers, unfruitful because of a lack of the practical genius of the common man, or worse, become the instruments of further robbery in the hands of power. This is strange doctrine. Men die for preaching it. And yet another stranger doctrine, though really it is as old as man himself, that these things are to be won, not by entrusting power to legislators, but by the direct dealing of a sympathetic support, finally by complete socialization of the sources and means of production. If in the final struggle, as a measure of resistance, force become necessary, then use it. For saying these things, our comrades died. The Haymarket bomb was only the excuse for silencing their tongues. Well, the tongues are silenced, but now the silence speaks. As the prophet voice foretold, still from the prison earth, in the shade of the gallows tree, there springs the blossom of human hope, the blood-root blossom, the blossom with the wax-white face and the red root. Strange it should grow always there, lilies from black mud, and hope, the highest hope, from the carmine stone of sacrifice. Yet thousands pluck the blossom, and hold it to their hearts, and the ideal of our dead waxes in the eyes of the living, and eyes meet eyes, and the light of them crosses the seas and the boundaries of the nations, and the dream grows, the dream of the common fraternity of humankind, and the equal liberty of brothers, and greed and tyranny and patriotism, dividing men from men, making them strike foul blows against each other. These very thousand years will die hard, but they will die, for they are of the past, the dead, and the new world, our world, the nationless world of free men, belongs to the living and the future. End of November 11th, 20 years ago. Section 7 of Selected Works, Haymarket Speeches, by Voltairine de Cleyre. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit librivox.org. The Defiance of August Spies, from Selected Works, Haymarket Speeches, by Voltairine de Cleyre. If death is the penalty for proclaiming the truth, then I will proudly and defiantly pay the costly price. Call your hangman. Truth crucified in Socrates, in Christ, in Giordano Bruno, in Huss, in Galileo, still lives. They and others, whose number is legion, have preceded us on this path. We are ready to follow. I think the soul that in those words breathed its indomitable conviction to the men about to sentence him to death, and 23 years ago today stepped from the summit of Chicago's cavalry out upon the pathway of great ghosts, had in the moment of their utterance a greater vision than the narrow courtroom, lined with human hate, the damning jury, and the bitter-lipped judge. I think that in that superb moment of defiance, the doomed men looked far through the girdle of faces, the girdle of stone, the girdle of time, and the girdle of death, and saw the immemorial procession, whose number is legion, marching unflinchingly up the human Via Dolorosa, and fell into line with them, and went upon the path with a rhythm of immortal footsteps in his ears, the sounding of immortal echoes in his brain. The figure that he and his comrades saw before them, towards which they marched, into which they were soon to merge. The figure and the face upon the hill of sacrifice. Was it the figure and the face of Christ, of Bruno, of Galileo, or that of a forgotten man, lost in some unknown fight of yesterday? Was it not rather the great face that Swinburne saw, and cried as he saw, "O sacred head, O desecrate, O labor-wounded feet and hands, O blood poured forth in pledge to faith, of nameless lives in divers lands, O slain and spent and sacrificed, people the grey ground, speechless Christ." I think that bears a vision of the time-old slaying of the common man, the men who have stood up to question the masters as to their handling of the world, for they were common men who had reason to ask why the commonwealth and the common things of the earth were not the common use and the common upbuilding of life, and they spoke in the common speech that was easy to understand, and as it was said of Christ, the common people heard them gladly. They stood on the street corners and spoke the gospel of self-salvation, the gospel of direct expropriation of natural and social wealth, which by the operation of existing law has become the possession of a limited class. And that was their crime, that they had told the people to act directly, and not through the intervention of political powers, which could never be trusted. They had told the people that the cause of their involuntary idleness and the inadequacy of their wages to buy back their products lay in the system of property, entrenched behind the moral law of the church and the force-sustained law of the state, but more than all behind the ignorance, the humility, the dog-like submissiveness of the workers themselves, who cringe and kneel and kiss the hand that smites them, believing in their own slavery. They had tried to waken in these cowering souls some consciousness of their true condition, some sense of what changes they might make in it, some question why starvation and privation should exist, some vision of a society wherein it did not exist, some realization of who is the enemy, some desire to dislodge that enemy from his seat of power, some knowledge of how their would-be saviors in political ranks buy and sell and cheat them always, some resolution to depend no more upon roundabout salvation from someone overheard, but upon their own direct, united action. This was their crime. Let no one ever suppose that it was less than this. The historians of this affair, wilfully or ignorantly, I believe in most cases wilfully, have taught the generation that has risen, since that the 5 men done to death by the state of Illinois 23 years ago were executed because they had been proven guilty of conspiring to throw a bomb at a meeting on the Haymarket. But this was never their crime, as those who managed the trial very well knew. The bomb was never anything to Grinnell and the man whose tool he was, but the excuse whereby they might crush the movement of the laboring people. There was direct revolutionary action. In his speech demanding their execution, the state's attorney came openly out, dropping the technical lies upon which the prosecution was supposed to be based, and plainly said, "Anarchy is on trial." That was the one truthful word he said. Men were to be hanged, not because they had thrown a bomb, or had aided, abetted, or suggested that anyone else throw it, or had even known who threw it, but because they had said, "Working men, you can never live as men, working at will, and commanding the result of your work until you socialize wealth, disregarding the law which robs you of it, brushing that law aside as a dead letter. And know that when you are ready to do this, force will be used against you. Be prepared to use force in return." Now, from the standpoint of the possessor, such speech is always a crime, and of this crime they were really guilty. The social revolt that we were dreaming of, the social overturning which would have put down the mighty from their seat and exalted them of low degree, was in the eyes of the masters of the world a crime beside which the Haymarket bomb was like the snapping of a pop gun in a boy's hands. A world full of people, not one of whom was hungry, not one of whom was naked, or shivering, or ill-sheltered, or idle against his will, wherein they themselves could no longer have the power to say this man, "Work and he works," or "Stop and he stops," or "This is mine, you maybe need it, and I do not, but it's mine. Touch it and you go to prison." What? They should no longer have the power to starve anyone, to freeze anyone, to clutch the wealth they do not need? What then would become of civilization? Ruination, disorder, chaos would follow. Oh, to be sure, a man might put such things in pretty books if they liked, print them in gold and blue on deckle-edged paper, and bind them in fancy leather, give them to their friends, and dawdle over them before and after dinner nap. It would while away an hour, but talk them to the common people, the people who might listen to it seriously, the hulking brutes who might take it into their heads to act. Oh, there could be but one answer to such a criminal against the public peace. Away with him, crucify him, crucify him. The terrible common people, the sewer rats they called us then, rats that had been driven into their holes, the common people who bear the burdens of the world, but are not to stretch out their unlovely hands to take the thing that they have fashioned, the common people who are so rude and so indelicate and so incapable of fine feeling, and so unable and unworthy to enjoy the art and the glory of life, the common people who are not fit to come among sensitive souls where high ideals are discussed, because they are dirty and coarse and low. Oh yes, it is always dangerous to talk to us. I remember, yes, as if it were yesterday, though it is 20 years ago and more. The memory rankles yet of the delicate disgust of a would-be reformer who came to me saying, "Some striking miners came to the club last night, and really they smelled." No doubt they smelled, and the choke damp of the eternal night of the mine, and all that the mine means, the grime, the body reek, the unwashed clothes and vile food, the vile tobacco and the viler whiskey. No doubt they smell of it all. That is how coal is paid for, by the common man who mines it. Creature of all disgust is the common man, to those who do not pay the price for their little niceties. He is dirty, yes, he is dirty, very, very dirty. The vomit of the engine and the fire pit is on him, the grease of the machine, the splat of the gutter, and the distillation of the sewer, the ashes of the city dump heaps, the slime of rotting refuse, every parasite and every germ that ever crawled and spilled its venom on humanity has crawled upon him, just as there is no foul and filthy hole above or underground into which it has not crawled. Yes, he is dirty. He is hulking and ill-shapen and ungainly. Yes, his figure is unhandsome. He has crept on it too much, crept into vicious places where life stared death in the eyes, and both clutched at him, and sometimes he left a piece of his body in death's fingers. When his shoulders bend together, you go through a narrower aperture. When your right arm swings all day doing one work, you become one-sided. When familiarity with a machine breeds contempt, your boss is in a hurry, you feed your fingers to the machine sometimes. When you wait the pleasure of baling iron, it occasionally explodes and peppers you with sparks, and leaves something that looks like leper spots upon the skin. Yes, the common man is ill-shapen, and deformed, and unhandsome. He is diseased with vile, unamiable diseases. Oh yes, he has sweated in our social slaughter-pens, till every vein ran fire instead of blood. And then in raging thirst he has drunk evil drinks that fill him full of alcoholic indifference and villainous lust, and he has infected himself with a taint that has taken him to the hospital, a thing for the worms to feed on before he was dead. Yes, all that, all that. He's coarse and loud-mouthed and dull-eared and squint-eyed, and his speech is loathsome. Yes, he's coarse. He's the digger in the dung heaps. The dung heap does not make people fine, but it has to be dug. Yes, he's loud-mouthed. He speaks across the roar of the engine and growling wheels, above the sound chaos of the city streets. He speaks of work, loud-sounding work, in coarse work tones, as men speak who have to do with imperative, primal activities. Dull-eared, oh yes, sometimes he cannot distinguish a preference between a symphony orchestra and the slash of a rip-saw. The saw has trained him, not the violin. Squint-eye. Yes, he has squinted at micrometers in the semi-darkness of a shop, till he cannot open his eyes wide any more. He has squinted at gauges till his sight is narrowed to a gauge. He has squinted down the throat of red-hot furnaces, till he has seen the very nerve of sight. Dazzled and blinded, he drops his lids, and looks at the green world outside, and sees it with a wide red flare over it, the burnt-in image of the furnace throat reflected. His speech is loathsome, yes, very loathsome, full of coarse and obscene images, vulgarities for which he does not blush, boisterous curses and vapid laughter. For the worst of all the robbery that has been done upon him is that his soul has been robbed away too, and if the beauty and the strength of the body have been twisted and malformed and stabbed away, so to dim down the light of the inner man that might have been, till it is but a faint spark, glimmering through a junk heap of broken possibilities, twisted and perverted passions. Yes, the common man is all that, rough, uncouth, misshapen, dull, vulgar, vapid, unfit to grace a social festivity, to bow and scrape in a dance salon, or carry a lady's fan, but also, he has dug, he has mined, he has burrowed, he has tunneled, he has blasted and smelted and forged, he has ploughed and planted and gathered and piled and shipped and fetched and carried, he has built and torn down and rebuilt and cleaned and scoured and repaired, he has woven and cut and sewed and clothed, and man's world cannot stand without him, not for a day, not for an hour. Without the dancing master and the fan carrier, it still could spin right merrily. Without the miner and the farmer and the sewer rat, never. And seeing this, and understanding this, and feeling all the wrong and shame of our disinheritance, both of the body and the mind, it happens sometimes that a figure steps from the sullen or indifferent ranks, and a voice arises crying in the wilderness, and this too is the common man, the man who is something more than all this rest I have been saying, for he is also the man who goes to unbury his fallen comrade when the mine crushes him, though he knows the chances to save are few, and the chances that he also will be crushed are many, the man who goes down into the sewer gas to save his reeling companion, and falls by his side, the man who springs into the jaws of the sea to save from it what stranger he knows not, and drowns together with the stranger, the man who thrusts a heedless fellow craftsman from a danger track and is ground to pieces for his generosity, and the man who cries to all these weak, atrophic, opiated souls, "Comrades, it is wrong. The earth is as much ours as theirs, those people who are shutting us out from its free use. The conquests of the dead are as much ours as theirs, those people who claim them as their sole inheritance, and will not let us use them. Life can be arranged otherwise. We do not need to be hungry, because there is too much food, nor shelterless, because we have built too many houses, nor naked, because we have made too many clothes. We do not need to be idle, because someone has made so much profit that it pays him for us to be idle. We can all work, and all have leisure to straighten our backs, and unbend our muscles, and train our brains. We can do this thing, and we can do it ourselves, and we alone can do it. No one can do it for us. No one will do it for us. No one should do it for us. If we are great enough to make these things, we are great enough to use them, great enough to manage their making and their dividing. And if anything is made by us now, which we in freedom would not make, the labor which is too costly in human life for free men to make, then let those who wish to use it make it, or let it not be made. The purpose of society should be to enable men to live more freely and more fully than in single combat with nature. The purpose of work should be to build the workers' lives, not to rack, enslave, and destroy them. Come then, announce your will to be free men, to take full hold on life, and make it yours. No longer be the ball for politicians to toss back and forth. They will all betray you. Be your own saviors. So our comrades cried a quarter of a century ago, and like the self-forgetting swimmer, died for it. And they too were common men, for this likewise is among the sacrifices that are laid on them, that now and again they go up to Golgotha. They went, these 5 men, proudly and defiantly, believing in no after reward, knowing there would never be any justice done to them, but hoping and believing that their deaths would bear their message farther and wider than their lives had done. In Walheim you may read the stone-cut prophecy. The time will come when our silence will be more powerful than the voices you strangle today. There it stands, a death-defying conviction, waiting its fulfillment, and whether the years be many or whether they be few, till the people waken and take their own, the surety waits. Farther and wider indeed the words have already gone. The breath over the gallows blew them on all the winds of heaven, and men remember and commemorate tonight in London, in Berlin, in Paris, in Rome, in Madrid, in Barcelona, seething Barcelona, in Melbourne, in Cape Colony, what an American Commonwealth did on this day 23 years ago, line itself together with the tyrannies of Europe, prove government to be what our comrades had said, always and ever a tool of the propertied class, no matter what its form, and did men to death by false witness, and acknowledge prejudiced jury, and a hangman judge, not for anything they had done, but for what they had said, in the name of what someone else had done. All over the world their words are repeated, but still the day of awakening seems far off. Still the people with their ox-like eyes look patiently on at their own undoing, while the yoke remains upon their necks, and their deliverance taking seems far away. Maybe it will come sooner than it seems, There are sudden darkenings in the social sky at times. In the meantime, lest we forget, and lest our enemies think that we forget, we keep the hangman's day, the day they make corpses of men whose will in the world had been to make it a better place, the day they baptize the cause of human freedom once again with blood. Through the receding years I see the ghost figures rise, the luminous face of Adolf Fischer shining while crying, "This is the happiest moment of my life," the mutilated lips of Louis Ling, yet whispering, "Hoc da Anarchy," the homely steady resolute features of Engels saying, "Long live anarchy," the ringing prophecy of Spies, and the clear, sweet voice of Albert Parsons, pleading till the moment of strangulation, "May I speak, Sheriff Matson? Let me speak, O men and women of the America, oh!" We never knew what he wanted to say. The figures pass along others, and others rise behind them. And later, here in the 20th century, the great figure from the ditch of Montjuic, he too done to death for a word of liberty in the name of the deeds of others. How many more are to pass into that dusky column of the martyr ghost? Very, very many yet. There will be no end, till there is an end of the belief that ideas can be killed by killing men, or an injustice made acceptable, a dissatisfied people by putting a male hand upon the crier's mouth. Until then, the lot of a rebel will be to speak and to die for it. So we keep the 11th of November, that we may remember what was done, what may be done again, and if the lot comes to us, that we too may know how to die. End of the Defiance of August Spies. End of selected works. Haymarket Speeches by Voltairine de Cleyre.